First step 踏んでるニューゾーンこんなドラムが鳴るここはミラーボールの王国背筋が続々ある意味危険地帯だがもちろん首振りゃ安全地帯銃口向けられた気分ギターのヘッドドラムのランシャーボードンいや待てない DJ は次のブツを用意 You ready 夜は待ってはくれない感性の法則エクスタシーに流れ込むエクスラージ以上に構えとけ臆することはない最初は誰もがラフな青にさ年輪重ねりゃ自然に太くなるまるで奴のビート燃やすピートヒートアップする俺はポット差し出されたショットのみ干してスピードペンを書いため Do my thing 本気になれ Do my thing 言い訳はダメ Do my thing いらない情け Do my thing ペンを書いため Do my thing 本気になれ Do my thing
Good evening. This is The Dominance Academy. I'm your host, Mr. Justin. Ah, how about now? Thank you. I don't have my usual setup going on. I'm trying something else. But yeah, salute to Kevinism and Dr. Steele. Appreciate you. Yep. But yeah, I hope you guys have had a good week. I was saying that it's been very busy on my end. The end of October into now, 4 new guys have joined the academy, and I might have mentioned this earlier that probably maybe like mid to late next year we're gonna have another professor. You know, if this guy that I'm training keeps going the way he is, he's gonna be that you know, the first faculty at the academy. Yeah, so about the topic here, men failing with women, and you know, I was listening to Clubhouse again, and you hear a lot about like intention. You know, I don't like this audio setup, so I'm going to go back to what I had. But a lot of guys talk about intention, you know, intentionally dating, right? I'm intentional. And first of all, like, everybody's intentional. Everybody's intentional. Everybody has intentions. You can't do something without intention, you know? Yeah, that's much better. I can hear myself. So yeah, you can't do anything without intention. But the problem is that, a lot of guys, they get just stuck at intention, you know, and that's the interesting part, that, guys, they get, I don't know, it sounds good. Intentions always sound really good. But the thing is that, you guys get stuck in there, and I don't know if it's on purpose or if that's just, how you feel like marketing yourself. And, but it's not the way. It's certainly not the way. That's not how things are supposed to go. It's not how things are supposed to go as a man. So I did a little bit of a write-up on intention versus strategy, because you can't. So many people go through lives with intentions, and you don't get things done based on intentions. That's not how things work. I intended to come to work early today. I intended to get that thing done, but I overslept. Right? Intentions are basically, they're almost worthless. Almost. Not entirely, but they're like, their depth doesn't go very far. Okay. So I'm going to read this little bit for you guys to kind of kick us off. Most men live in a fog of intention. They intend to talk to a woman. They intend to have sex. They intend to lead. They intend to collar. They intend to change. They intend to become better men. But intention is cheap. It costs nothing to want something. Intention gives you the small high of possibility without the sacrifice of commitment. You can imagine yourself as a warrior without ever entering the battlefield. You can tell yourself that you mean well while still standing still. Intention is what men use when they want to feel masculine without earning it. Strategy, however, is what turns direction into destiny. Strategy means you've mapped the terrain between who you are and who you must become. You've built a plan that demands consistency, patience, and sacrifice. Strategy humbles you because it exposes how much you don't know yet. It demands you grow into a man who can carry what you claim to want. The path of suffering is paved with intention. The path of liberation is paved with strategy. A woman feels the difference instantly. When a man is all intention, his energy is scattered, hungry, performative, anxious to be seen. And she feels his words pulling in one direction and his body in another. It creates static in her nervous system. She can't trust him because his inner world isn't in rhythm. But when a man moves with a strategy, she feels the order. He doesn't just speak of control, he is control. His energy doesn't reach for her, it arranges the space around her. The woman doesn't surrender to a man's dreams, she surrenders to his design. That's why a dominant who lives in intention will always create confusion, while a dominant who lives in strategy creates peace. Intention says, I want to control you. Strategy says, I know exactly how I will hold you. The first produces fear, the second produces devotion. To live strategically is to live in deliberate silence. It means no longer advertising what you will do or who you think you are. It means closing your mouth and letting your actions carve your name into the world. The sword is not meant to be promised, it's meant to be drawn. When you speak of what you'll do, you're trying to convince yourself you still have power. When you do it, there's nothing to prove. Women respond to that kind of silence. They can feel when a man's will has no leakage. His words are measured, his gaze anchored, his body grounded. There's no hidden need behind his attention, no bargaining, no attempt to impress. He simply is, and that is what makes her soften. Sorry, I just wanted to check comments real quick. A woman's nature is fluid. She reflects the man's internal climate. If he is chaotic, she becomes restless. If he is stable, she can finally let her chaos unfold safely. What most men call female emotionality is often a mirror of their own inconsistency. The feminine is not unstable, she's responsive. She becomes a storm when the man's sky is unkept. That's why a submissive can only surrender to a man whose internal kingdom is ordered. Strategy gives her the map of his structure, how he will protect, guide, correct, and nurture her. Without that structure, her surrender becomes self-destruction. She falls into him and finds nothing there to hold her. Dominance without strategy is nothing but noise. It's control for its own sake. A man trying to feel power by creating reaction. But true power is not reactive. It's architectural. It builds. It repeats patterns. It refines over time. Strategy is ritualized authority. To lead is to know not just what you want from her, but how you will bring it forth. It means having a method for her training, a rhythm to your guidance, and a code that binds your own impulses. The greatest threat to any dominant is his own undisciplined will. Without a code, he becomes the chaos he's supposed to contain. The submissive can feel when the man's rules are situational. She senses when his dominance guides on his mood, or his dominance depends on his mood. That kind of man teaches her not to trust. She learns to guard herself even as she kneels. But the man who lives by principle instead of preference gives her the rarest gift a woman can feel: safety in surrender. The disciplined man does not need to raise his voice. His calm is louder than thunder. The way he touches her, the way he corrects her, the way he breathes in the silence. Each act tells her, I know where I'm taking you. She doesn't have to guess, and in that certainty, her body relaxes, her mind quiets, her devotion deepens. A man of strategy holds her deeper, not through force, but through inevitability. Every command fits into a larger design. Every ritual has a reason. Nothing is random. Nothing is impulsive. Even his stillness has direction. That's what separates a dominant from a man who merely likes control. Control seeks to manage. Leadership seeks to transform. Strategy is a devotion on the long arc. It is patience. It is repetition. It is deciding, planning, executing, and committing. It is the willingness to stay the course long after the thrill of intention fades, because intention is excitement. Strategy is endurance. Intention wants fast results. Strategy builds legacy. And legacy is what the feminine responds to most deeply. Her submission is her investment in your order. She will give more of herself to a man who has proven he can hold her heart without trembling. She will obey because she knows his rules serve her liberation, not his ego. This is the quiet secret of the masculine path. The more structure you bring, the freer she becomes. The more disciplined you are, the more chaos she can safely express. You do not tame her wildness, you give it a temple to dance in. So understand this: intention is the seed, but strategy is the soil. One without the other rots. Intend, decide, plan, execute, commit. These are not 5 steps. They are one act of the consciousness, stretched across time. Intention gives it purpose. Decision gives it direction. Planning gives it form. Execution gives it reality. And commitment gives it soul. This is how a man builds a kingdom, a dynamic, and a life. And in that kingdom, words lose their meaning. You no longer say, I'm a dominant. You simply live in such a way that everything around you responds to your will. The woman doesn't submit because you asked, or because you told her to. She submits because your presence makes any other posture impossible. That's not magic, it's strategy. So stop announcing what you're going to do. Stop posting your intentions. Stop trying to convince anyone you are powerful, including yourself. Be silent. Build. Move with precision. Keep your own counsel. Draw the sword only when the moment demands it. And when you do, cut cleanly. Because this is the way. To transform intention into embodiment. To transform fantasy, or to replace fantasy with form. To trade words for action. And to live so deliberately that the world itself bends to your order. This is the path from intention to liberation. This is the discipline of power. This is the way. So I hope that clears up. Hey, what's up, Mr. A? I hope that clears up an understanding behind intention and strategy. Because I was listening to all these guys, really they're just posturing. They're posturing for the women, in these groups. And these guys were like, oh yeah, I date with intention. I have the intention of dating to produce marriage and that sort of thing. And it's like, it's like, you ever see like one of those like Shaw Brothers movies, the old kung fu movies, where there's always like this cocky soldier or warrior, you know what I mean? Like he's part of the army or something along those lines. And he's cocky, strutting around, and he's like, I'm going to take out this sword and I'm going to beat somebody with it or kill somebody with it. He's got this like, the promise of his abilities. And then always, like when the situation, like shit hits the fan, he's the one cowering the corner. Like all that intention just goes out the window when push comes to shove. And this is what I see with a lot of guys. I see that they have great intentions of changing their lives. I have tons of consultation calls every month. They all come in with the intention of bettering themselves, of becoming more grounded, to become in such a way that they can confidently say, I'm a man. And the majority of them do not step forth on the path, because that's going to demand that they take the shape necessary. But if you don't step on the path, you can always talk about what you're going to do or what you intend to do. But when you actually start taking the steps, when you start living the life and start changing your form just one step at a time, then you no longer have to proclaim what you're doing. You're just doing it. And so if like for these guys in these rooms, on Clubhouse, if they intend to date with the goal of marriage, just do that. There's no need to talk about it. There's no need to announce to other people, especially women, that this is what you're going to do. Like that's just caping. Like that's just marketing, branding yourself like I'm like this, not like that. This detergent gets your clothes even whiter. This detergent is safe for, delicate fabrics. It's just marketing, So I really don't support people just having intentions. And a book that I have my students read, you should probably check it out. It's called Hagakure, and it's a book about the art of the samurai, Bushido. And there's this idea that you never brandish your weapon. Even when I was living in the temple, that was Chinese, not Japanese, but there's just this idea, like you never raise your hands, right? Unless you're sparring or you're in actual combat. You never just brandish a weapon and start waving around like, hey, look at this, look at how fucking cool I am, right? You don't do that, right? Because it's an instrument for killing. So either you're training or you're using it for killing. That's it. And I feel like guys who express their intentions to lead, their intentions to say like dominate, your intentions towards a woman, oh yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. All these like just these fluffy promises, okay, which aren't real promises. It's like brandishing that blade. Like I'm going to cut, I could cut, I might cut, in the future I will cut, I want to cut, I'm going to cut. And so they never really draw the blade, right? They just kind of unsheath it a little bit to show about a few inches, and then they put it back, right? See, it can, it's there, but I'm never going to use it because that takes balls to draw the blade, put the scabbard on the ground, and then say, all right, let's go. You know, that's the commitment part, or conviction, and saying, this is what I'm choosing to do. Whether I live or die, this is what's happening. And the live or die could be, this is going to work out or it's not going to work out. It doesn't matter. What matters is I am deciding. This is the path that I'm choosing. And, win, lose, or draw. And I feel like this sort of thinking is lost on men today. I think it's very much lost on men. There's a great fear for failure, a great fear of making a mistake, messing up, perhaps appearing to look bad. And I blame social media. I didn't see this prior to social media. It was, and it all started with, like MySpace, and it all started with MySpace and Facebook and likes, right? Just the concept of likes. Even going back to when it was just photo sharing, like, hey, look at these pictures from my graduation or my vacation last month or whatever. And started that dopamine thing. And then people started sharing themselves more. And then at that point, that's when the consciousness started to split, like fracture, and then extend. So it broke into little pieces, and those shards extended to the online world. And now you have this extended consciousness, this extended identity, and for people to observe and judge, either to like it or to not like it. Okay. And then there's subtleties in there, like, say someone's got a story and you can see that it was watched but not liked. And you're like, so like that says something. There's this unspoken language that happens with, social media. And I think that this brought about, in all users, men and women, but it's different because women have always been really hypersensitive to how they are perceived. But men, we've gone through many generations without even thinking about this. And because of the influence of social media, it's become much more prevalent. And so now there's this second consciousness where there's this awareness, this self-consciousness, where you are very much aware of how you are perceived and the effect that being approved of, likes, has on you. And so, some people either shy away from that and they're like, oh, I'm not going to do anything. But they still kind of engage, but they don't like show their face or whatever. They're scared, or they're very performative, such that they can produce a persona or an image that is next to flawless, or they try their best to never show any mistakes or anything like that. And, and this is dangerous. This is really dangerous. And this is where I see the shift in guys, because it brings them into that state of like, who's watching me? And it changes how you move. And to think like women have been in this a very similar mindset for a long fucking time. Maybe that's part of why they're a little bit batty. I don't know, but it's making guys a little batty. So it could be a contributing factor of this idea that people are always watching and judging. And I imagine it can produce anxiety. It can produce a different awareness. Before, like when I was a young man, like nobody gave a shit like about going to talk to girls. It's like what was expected of you. Like this is just what you did. I was remembering when I was a kid, I was listening to some old 80s music, and Jump came on, I think by Van Halen, and it just brought me right back to this place called Skate Estate. And my mother used to bring me and my friends there, when we were like 14, 15 years old. It's like, you're not old enough to go out, right? You needed something. And so this is where all like the teens from the high schools would come. It's just this big roller skating rink indoors. There were video games. There was like, pizza, hot dogs, French fries and stuff. Good music, pop stuff of the time. And it was just, that was where you went. Like that was your social atmosphere, because we couldn't go to bars. And you just went and talked to girls. Like that's just what you did. Like you had to skate like across the thing, and like the girls would kind of all huddle together or skate together, and the boys would skate together. And then like sometimes there would be like, all right, couples, and like the MC would say like, all right, it's couples dance or couples skate. So that was your opportunity to be like, hey, like you want to skate with me for these songs? They play like 3 songs or something and then go back to open. Or maybe it was less than 3. Maybe it was just 1 song. But nevertheless, there was that opportunity. It was just expected. Like it was okay, and girls would be like, no. And some girls would say yes. And it was not a big deal. But now there's just this notion of like, ooh, I'm on the spot. There's so much pressure, and guys are like, well, I'm afraid to talk to this girl in public because like, what will other people think? And just to have like such an ego, right? To be so self-centered, to think that other people give a shit about you in that way is beyond me. It's an incredibly egotistical way to think, that others really give a shit about like you just saying hi to some girl. It's not real. Your fears are not real. And if they were, like what's the worst? What's the worst that could possibly happen? And guys are literally talking about being socially castrated. Like I even heard that term, is being socially castrated. What's up, Mitch? Good evening, Scorpion. So, yeah, I heard that term, like, oh, I'll be socially castrated. I will be able to, if I talk to this girl and like, blows out on me, like she's going to say this, she'll post about me, like, maybe they have got like friends in common. I don't know. But then they're worried that like they'll get clowned online, and that will just destroy their reputation. And it's like, okay, so you just want to be like, just stay in this like safe little bubble, like this, not even like a bubble that can pop, but like a plastic bubble. I think there was a movie called The Bubble Boy, something along those lines. And it's about this kid who had this like rare immunodeficiency thing, and like just a cold, just getting a cold could kill him. And so he lived in this like hermetically sealed bubble, and his parents had to like do special things to like feed him, and then he had like this special suit that he could go out into the world, and it was like this very soft, it looked like a deep sea diving suit, but it was soft. It wasn't like hard armor or anything. But that's like how guys are living now. They're like these like bubble boys walking around and like just so afraid of catching just a cold because it might kill them. Catching a no or catching a laugh from a girl because it would literally destroy him. And the thing is that no amount of preparation, no amount of intentions will turn you into a resilient man, except facing things that are difficult. You want a stronger mind, you have to do things and face things that challenge your mind. You want to be more emotionally resilient, face things and do things that challenge your emotions. Same with your body. It's like you bring your body to the gym. Why can't you do the same mentality for your mind and your emotions? Put things to the test, but you can't because, it's very difficult when you're needy. And so in order to move forward, you're really going to have to face the challenge of your own neediness and like why you have it there in the first place. Because like if they, if women can pick up on that intention of yours, the intention of fulfilling your neediness, it stinks, right? And you could be a great guy on the surface. You could be really nice. You don't use swear words. You go to church every weekend. You say your blessings at night. You help your mother. You call your friends every week. Maybe you volunteer at the soup kitchen on Saturdays. You could be a great guy, but like being a great guy in that way, it really doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything for women, especially when it comes to arousal. Like, sure, she's not gonna like hate you, because you're a good guy, but it's nothing that makes her knees weaken, and nothing that really just kind of like softens her exterior and liquefies her interior such that she can't even hold form. And it feels good to her to soften and then liquefy. It feels good, right? Because it's challenging. It challenges the nervous system to remain erect and hold form all the time, because that is not typical, right? Not a natural state for women, unless they have like a particular background or they're like very type A, which is not super common. Okay. But even still in those types, at the core, there's still a desire to liquefy, and liquids need something to go into, right? They need to go into it. So, and in order for that to happen, you guys have to become firmer. You cannot allow every little thing to get under your skin. And the problem is that a lot of guys think is that by becoming hard, okay, that means becoming like aggressive. And hardness is not aggressiveness. Aggressiveness is actually, when it's not tempered, okay, but just a plain old aggressiveness, it's actually quite volatile, right? It's closer to being a liquid than a solid. If we were to kind of put it into those states, okay, those scientific states, earth, or liquid, gas, or solid, I'd say aggression is closer to being a liquid because it can move, right? It's volatile. It's not stable, grounded, centered, but you can make it, you can harness it, right? In the same way you put a bridle on a horse's head or a leash on a dog, the dog could still be just as vicious, right? But it only responds to commands. It doesn't instinctually just lash out, okay? Those dogs get put down, right? Or they get trained. So this is really how to utilize something like aggression. But, guys, though, that great guy, he's not going to have that, or he's going to be so afraid of that aspect of himself. He's just going to push it away because he learns to not approve of this. He learns that this is bad taste, that people don't like aggressive people, and it's true to a certain degree, like when it's not controlled, like when you're like easily triggered by like something that a woman says, that's no good. Like if she just kind of like pokes you just a little bit, just to see if you're as dense as she thinks you are, and you pop instead, or you crumble. And so then she's like, oh, like, wow, he like really flipped out. And she's like, how dare you disrespect me, blah, 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 And all she did was just make like a little remark or like question a certain something. Like I've heard guys lose their mind simply by a girl questioning them. Kind of like a how dare you? How dare you question me? Right? Just losing their minds over shit like that. when really you should just be like mildly amused. That's the mentality. Like, that's being still. You know, there's no reason to draw the blade on something like that. Not at all. You know, but it's like, you know, that's but that's what draws them in. You know, when they poke and you're just like, ugh, and you just kind of like brush it off, like, you know, like you're brushing off dust from your shoulder. And then she's like, okay, so he's not really, you know, perturbed or disturbed in any kind of way. And it's a weird thing, right? It kind of like sets them up because, you know, a girl can only know like a capacity of men based on just what they've experienced. That's all they know. I mean, that's all we all know, right? We can't know about something that we've not experienced. You know, maybe in theory, you know, not the scientific theory, but just the, you know, the colloquial version of theory. You can read as much as you want about surfing, right? But until you really go surfing, you're not really going to know what it's about. So all of our knowledge really that we can say we know this just comes through experience. And, you know, especially when it comes to things like human behavior. So a woman can only know from what she's experienced. So, and typically guys are easily triggered either through sadness or they pout, you know, they get passive aggressive, they get aggressive. It's like, or like, what is it? Passive, you know, assertive aggressive. And that's what they know. But then to come across a guy where there's a poke or something along those lines, and he doesn't react like that. He doesn't react at all. He just responds. And his emotions seem completely unmoved. And he just kind of brushes it off like a flea. Like, that's kind of like, you know, if you, every time you come up to like a pond, you throw a pebble into it, ripples extend out from that pebble. But then imagine like you come across a pond and you toss the pebble into the pond and it doesn't create ripples. It just goes blip and goes in. No ripples created whatsoever. And you'd be like, huh? What is going on with that thing? Like, what's up with that water? That's interesting. And you touch it and you're like, yeah, it's definitely water, but it's just, I can't disturb the surface of it. And that's what happens. You know, like, that's kind of how your mental and emotional state need to be. And that's really what can be trained. You have to train it in. You know, and it first starts with just awareness, you know, paying attention to your initial emotional reactions to things. You don't do anything about it. You just observe. And then because that starts the creation of an observer. Okay. And it takes some time, but that observer then becomes more substantial and he can start just watching you. And so you're not like, and what that does is it prevents you from being in, like, completely present and being in the emotion, in the situation. And it allows you just a little bit of distance. And this is what allows you then, over time, you get used to that observer being there. And then you can stop making your knee-jerk reactions. Because you can start noticing patterns, okay? And then you try to restrain yourself from enacting on those same patterns. And it can feel awkward, it can feel difficult, it can feel frustrating. And, you know, but over time, you train your nervous system to respond in a different way. Like, just in the same way that, like, say, like a soldier is trained, right? They do a lot of things that are strenuous to the nervous system, that simulate different aspects of combat. Because, you know, before military training, like, let's say you've never had much experience with the feeling of someone wanting to harm you or kill you. It was completely foreign to you. Maybe you've never used firearms before. And so the whole thing, like, when you first come into it, you know, whether it's like hand-to-hand combat, close quarters combat, other forms of combat training, at first the nervous system is like, what the fuck is going on here? I want to run. I want to hide. And you're trying to rewire it, saying, no, 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 defy your instinct and stay here. Like, stand your ground and face this onslaught to your nervous system. And then over time, your mind's like, okay, all right, I can handle this. And then it starts handling it more and more and more comfortably, to the point now where there could be fucking chaos going on and you can think clearly. You're no longer at this like this jumpy, like if you've ever seen like a rabbit out in the wild, like they're never relaxed. It's like they're on edge or they're sleeping. That's it. When they're awakened in the world, they're constantly on edge. And so that sort of being on edge, it just gets more and more subdued. And so you can do this to yourself, but it takes intentional training, just the way they do in the military. You have to be very, like, not just intentional about your own training, right? With this desire, I intend to get my nervous system under control so that I don't react and I respond. I choose to respond. You can't just intend for that. Do you see how intentions are like dreams? They're like fairy tales that you can tell yourself. But when you commit, when you create a strategy and a plan for your nervous system to change from where it is to where you'd like it to be, then you can start implementing things. You can create a strategy for beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels of this. You can do research. You can plot out, how you're going to do. You can start taking notes and just observe, journal about these things. And over time, you will notice changes. I just spoke with, one of my guys who's been with me for a while, and he's been having trouble with his wife. And I don't mean to, I'm not going to get into any kind of details, but at first he was just entirely reactive. Everything was reactive about this guy. And, and it offset his wife, because she didn't feel the stability in him. And she was just kind of like, she was like unhinged, but not in like a crazy sort of way, but just in the way that like she was not on his program. She wasn't submissive to him. She wasn't, on any kind of protocols. There were no rules. There were no expectations of behaviors. He was just reacting constantly to her, natural chaos. And it just really just set him off, like, constantly. And so he was just in this constant state of putting out fires, these little fires, like within her and within himself. And you can't do that. You can't go through life this way. You can't go through a marriage this way, where you're constantly extinguishing all these little fires just so you can get to a point where you can relax, until the next misunderstanding, right? Or the next argument. And like a lot of guys go through this. A lot of guys go through things like this. They go through their marriages and their relationships this way. And so you have to train your mind to be less reactive, to have that conductor mindset of being a foot 12 inches back and 12 inches up. Because, when you do this, you are then assuming authority. Whether she's like on board with the authority or not, that's irrelevant. Because the most important part is that you shift into this mental space. And, that's going to take some training as well, because at first, when you say, you know what, I'm going to try this. I'm going to embody a sense of authority. All right. I'm going to have boundaries, and I'm going to, try to have rules and, stand up for myself, harden my spine, breathe from my balls, all that good shit. Okay. And the unfortunate part is that you haven't still worked out the fact that your nervous system is reactive. So now your sense of authority is also going to be reactive. It's going to be emotionally charged. Okay. And this is not the correct way to lead. You can't lead with rules that are governed by your emotions. Like that leads to tyranny. Okay. Because when you're very like connected to your emotions in that way, you're in relationship, or you're dating some girl or whatever. There's going to be fears there. There's going to be aversion to pain. There's going to be fear of her doing this or doing that. And if you are the type who's going to be like, all right, I'm going to just put this out there and make rules around these things, then you're just kind of you're ruining everything by doing that. And like one of my guys, he started out that way. Actually the dude who I think is going to work his way to becoming faculty at the academy, he started out that way. Because he wanted it so bad. He's like, I see what you're doing. I see what you're doing, Justin. I see the life and the relationship and how you kind of create things. And, I send like snippets of my own relationship to my guys so they can see, how I communicate, which shows them sort of how I think within the relationship and, how my girl responds and things of that nature, so they can kind of see and feel out the structure. And so at first, he, just like many other guys, they're like, oh, I want to do that. I want that. Okay. And I don't blame him, not at all. But the problem is that, he and, many guys like him, they haven't sorted themselves out yet. They're still reactive. So he went and, grabbed up a bunch of rules, not a bunch, a few. And while there was nothing like truly unreasonable about the rules themselves, it was problematic because he was still coming from a place of fear and a place of aversion to pain. And so, he was, I can't remember what it was. Like, oh, you have to like message me every morning or message me every day, something along those lines. I think it was like message me every day. And like, don't leave my messages hanging. Yeah, like don't leave my messages hanging for too long. And this really bothered him when he would like say like, he'd message and like hours would go by. And he'd get really emotionally disturbed by this. And we kind of had to like, well, why do you want to do this? And he wanted to have that kind of control over her so that he wouldn't feel this feeling. And it's like, okay, well, let's look at that feeling for a little bit. All right, let's take off a few layers and see what's really underneath. And we discovered that this issue had a long thread going through it. And it went back into childhood stuff, right? About feeling like he wasn't enough, that he wasn't paid attention to enough, not verbally supported in the way that he needed when he was a youngster. And so this caused a grasping for attention, grasping for communication, which would then make him feel seen and make him feel safe. But, of course, he's not aware of those things until I brought it to his attention. So without that information being brought to his attention, he's just creating what he thinks on the surface is like, oh yeah, this is good. Like, I like this. I want to see it. And then he became very much aware that his rules were fueled by these childhood wounds. And this is not just like this one guy. This is tons of dudes, tons and tons of them who are like reaching for control, but from the position of a child with arrested development. So the development gets arrested, it gets halted, okay, in a particular point of development. But their body still ages. The rest of their mind still ages. And so you've got a grown man who's like, say like in his mid-30s, but he has the emotional resilience in specific areas of life, like dealing with women that's frozen at like the age of 8, where he's still looking for mom. He's still looking for that. He needs that emotional security. And then that gets supported by so many narratives around, right? There, guys who are agreeing with him, women who are supporting, any sort of like verbiage that supports that underdeveloped child, that child state. And so it seems like it's a normal thing. And it's like, no, it's not normal. I mean, it's normal, but it's just underdeveloped. And, and then they start looking at her behaviors and wondering, like, this stuff on the surface that he's seeing, the behaviors on the surface, and he's like super frustrated. Why is she not doing this stuff? And it's because, and she may not be fully aware, but her unconscious is able to smell, like it can smell the uncertainty on you. It can smell the fear on you. Like maybe women have the same thing that dogs do. Like dogs, they can smell the hormones that are released from your body when you feel fear. And maybe women have something similar. Like there's a part of their olfactory system that can pick up on those hormones released into the air. And so, whatever it is, a lot of women, they can pick up on that. And they're like, I'm not feeling this like 100%. He's cute, he's reliable, whatever, we have good sex, but there's this like emotional drift where I'm like kind of like drifting off onto the side a little bit, and I'm not wanting to like fully get on board. And and that comes with, she may not even understand it. She may not have a clear understanding of why her just emotionally she's just reacting in that way, and like, good on them, right? This is part of survival and mating strategies that are baked into the DNA. Because it would just be terrible. It would be a terrible life for all those involved. If women just kind of, I don't know, like went with guys who had just interest, right? Without listening or even having those instinct tools of safety. So, that said, get rid of your intentions or extend your intentions with an actual plan. Because like, what's the point of just having a dream? Like you dream when you're sleeping. Don't dream when you're awake. Make plans. That's what's important. That's what actually gets things done, That's what creates things in reality. Like, so I just had to like stabilize something here. Okay, that's better. But this is what forms things into reality. You get to control more of your reality. And I think I mentioned that. A leadership seeks to transform. Where is that? Just looking at the thing I read for, execution. Yes, I said intend, decide, plan, execute, and commit. They're not 5 separate steps. They're one act of consciousness stretched across time. Intention gives it purpose. Decision gives it direction. Planning gives it form. And execution gives it reality. And commitment gives it soul. So it's the execution part that gives it reality. It brings it into the world, And things don't always go as planned, and that's all right. I was looking into the building of the bridges and tunnels here in New York City. And I'm thinking, like a long time ago, like the Lincoln Tunnel. When was the Lincoln Tunnel built? The center tube opened in 1937. Construction started in 1934. 1934. All right, let's look at the Holland Tunnel. Oh, even further back. So let's look at, all right. Holland Tunnel was built between 1920 and 1927, okay? Between New Jersey and Manhattan. And it goes underwater, all right? They didn't have the fucking technology that we've got today. And I think even with today's technology, it would be quite challenging, okay? Just imagine, like someone or someone's got together and said, hey, let's make this idea a reality. All right, they figured, hey, we can't build a bridge. Like that's, maybe that was too long. I don't know why they didn't build a bridge, but they're like, you know what, let's make a tunnel. And they had this strategy. They created a strategy, a plan. They worked out issues along the way, which is another problem guys have. They try to prepare, and they want to gather all the things together such that they reduce rejection as much as possible, reduce pain as much as possible, reduce their fear as much as possible. And then nothing gets done because they're constantly in a state of preparation to meet the feminine. And it's like, well, then that means you're being guided by the feminine. But anyways, so, they had a plan and they executed the plan and made changes along the way, but they came across stuff that I'm sure they didn't foresee. And I'm sure that tons of people died trying to make that tunnel. Because they just didn't have the technology. So I'm thinking, like, how do they go about this? Imagine, like, what do you do with the fucking water and all the soil they have to, dig down into? How you're bringing all the materials together to create this thing. There's, cement involved. Like, cement and perpetual water don't mix too well, right? I got to look into that. I got to see, the steps and, how they actually went about building the Holland Tunnel back in fucking 1920. All right, I think that's still the steam era. They're just fucking around with steam engines and construction vehicles that were steam engine diggers and shit like that. And it's but they did it. The point is that they did it. Right? There was an intention, and followed by planning and execution, and having, putting some soul into it. And yeah, people got hurt, people died, but that's what happens. You cannot have execute something and think that there will never be any collateral damage. That's what happens. They say whenever one door opens, another one closes. That's just the balance of the universe. That's just how things are. You train for a fight or to be a fighter. You plan on getting punched. You plan on getting kicked. You plan on getting choked out. For the samurai, they when they go into battle, they're planning on dying. I don't know if it's planning, but they're expecting the idea that the potential for death is quite high, and it's accepted. That's just a natural thing of the environment and the activity. You play with swords, a lot of times people die. And it's fine to prepare, sure, but eventually you just have to step out. You have to take action. And I remember years ago I hired a business coach, and he's like, Justin, you just have to start taking messy action. Like, who cares how it ends up? Because like, you're a beginner. Like, just do shit. Just start moving, start taking action, and don't stop. And you can just refine along the way. But because you don't have experience of how this will work and how people respond to that and so on, you can't possibly prepare for that. You can a little bit, but there's just too many variables. So you just have to jump in. Jump in and start treading water. And that's how it goes. You know, my guys who are in relationships, I was like, look, just think about certain rules and certain boundaries and start easy, start small, and get used to being in that position and understand that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to slip up. You're not going to read the situation properly. You know, like I got a guy, like he's a young guy. And he's one of my younger pupils. And he, you know, he's got a girlfriend and he tends to be a little serious. He's fallen on his face a bunch of times. Okay. Not so bad that, you know, she's like super offended or scared and she wants to leave, but it was enough to like kind of crumble her mood, you know, for like a couple days or something. And, you know, he would have to correct it. He would have to apologize, you know, because he was kind of like, you know, leading from blindness. And, you know, so he got too fixated on rules and boundaries. And certainly they should be within your your awareness, like all times. But that can't be the only thing that you're focused on. And because it becomes too rigid, and like that's not going to be a way to lead a woman, is through rigidity. Certainly you need to have some rigidity, but if that's your only state, then it's only going to lead to a docile woman. And I've explained to you guys the difference, right, between a docile woman and a submissive woman. Docile is obedient out of fear. And we don't want obedience out of fear, do we? Like, you know, you look at the girls in my background, like they look happy. They look so just like overly satisfied. Like they wouldn't dream of anything else beyond what they're doing in that moment. And to be in that state, it's incredibly vulnerable. To just allow for the emotions and the body and the spirit to kind of like all be in the same moment. And I can only imagine the challenge of allowing oneself to be that vulnerable. Yeah, I'm gonna have to ask my sub about that, about her thoughts on that sort of thing. You know, because I can only speculate as much as I can, but it's not my experience. So, you know, she's done some very good and thoughtful writing. Oh, speak of the little shit. Here she is. Yeah, she does very good writing, good reflecting. So perhaps I'll ask her about that moving forward. But, you know, and this is part of it, because, you know, like the guy that I was talking about, the young dude, like he was too fixated on holding the shape that he lost track of like who was in the shape. You know, the vessel has to become aware that there's liquid inside it. It can't be just totally fixated on its vesselness. And that was the mistake that he was making, that he made like a number of times. But the point is that he was willing to make mistakes. He was willing to accept the responsibility of apologizing after there was an offense or some sort of, minor emotional injury. And, and that too, it builds your resilience. It builds resilience to stand within your own mistakes and own them, and not defend yourself by getting sad, because that's a defense mechanism. Not defend yourself with aggression or over explanation, but to just objectively accept what is, and to be able to apologize very simply and cleanly. And obviously you don't want to be making lots of mistakes over and over, because that just shows you're not learning. But when you do make mistakes, that how you handle it is no different than how you handle everything else. So if I'm saying that I expect you to, handle her bratty behavior with calm resolve, like a mountain, right? Or a giant oak tree. Any sort of problems that come up in life, I would have that expectation too. And so the same mechanism, the same tools or whatever is utilized for when you're kind of like owning what you've done or what you've said. And there's no like emotional reaction to kind of protect the ego. It's just saying, well, this is it, this is what is, and accepting the clear objective reality of it. And this regard, sure, she's going to feel the pain of that mistake, right? But it, how you realign things is just as important. It's imperative, right? Because she's not going to be the one, and I don't think she wants to be the one to align things. I mean, maybe she'll influence things, kind of like nudge in the direction of saying like, well, this is kind of how I want to feel. I'm hoping that you kind of get the hint, right? Because they don't like to be in the position of like guiding you, right? Because now it's like you doing it, it's not really genuine, and they want you to show up genuine. Now it's like when you're a little kid and, grandma gives you a little present and your mom nudges you and says like, say thank you. And you're like, thank you. It's not a real thank you. You're just following orders, The big guy just woke from his sleep to get off the couch, look around, and then get back on the couch and go back to sleep. It's like, what are you doing? But yeah, it's basically like having a consistency of character, regardless of what's happening. Whether it's with your girl, whether it's with your job, whether it's with something else in life, whether it's just you dealing with you. It's having the consistency of character. And this is living through codes. This is living through principle. And that's really what kind of like brings it forth, right? It brings her submission forth when you do this. Kind of like calls it in, and without really having to call it in. It's a really strange phenomenon, so that you can really get a lot of what you are desiring from a woman in relationship simply by aligning yourself. First sorting out what your codes even are, without trying to impress yourself or sound cool or feel cool, but just what actually is true within you. This is not that far off from truth. Looks and height, that's what attracts women, simple and plain but real. Yes, but attraction is not very deep, right? It's a surface level reaction to something, right? Kind of like if you're walking along and you see something shiny on the ground and your attention goes, ooh, shiny, right? Because we're trained to see attractive things, okay? But attractiveness, right? Whether having like a nice face or height, it's not penetrative. It does not penetrate her core. A woman, when she is, when she's fantasizing, when she's masturbating, she's not thinking about tallness. She's not thinking about a handsome face. She's really fixated on a feeling. And faces and height do not penetrate into her core. It does not shake her to her knees and having her feel good about it. All right. So attraction is, it's a real thing. Okay. But, understand this for everybody, not just in this female game person. Thank you for joining us, by the way. It's a necessary but short. It has a short road, and when I see, guys, they're hyper fixated on the attraction level of things, and it's like, man, like, haven't you gotten past that yet? Just the attraction part, it's not super hard, unless you're like a 3-foot Quasimodo, with some sort of like defect. Then there's chances that you can kind of like increase things and taking action and not having just your whole mind filled with intentions. I'm intending to talk to 5 girls today. Well, did you actually do it, or did you just remain scared and filling your head with excuses and science says this, so I'm not going to take action, right? This statistic says, X amount of women only go for guys who are above, 5'9", and so guys will hold on to things like that as a, plausible deniability, to give them a believable excuse that they can tell themselves that they don't have to take action because they're, 5'8". Like, well, the stats say that, 70% of women, you know what I mean? And so they are, they're just giving themselves reasons to remain where they are, and at the end of the day, it's not about the woman, is it? It really isn't. It's not about the woman. It's about you changing from your arrested development, from your fear, from being in a reactive state to a place that's not reactive at all, even to your own fears, No, I would argue that there is no looks at all involved. It's feeling. It's feeling, it's emotion. It's not images. We can't think about it in the way that men and women fantasize completely differently. Completely. It's an emotion thing, and just looks are important for sure. That's why we should take care of ourselves. But it's it's a very short-lived thing. It doesn't have a very long road. It won't make like being tall and handsome will not produce the emotions. If you can imagine the emotions in the girls that are in my backdrop here, there's very, very strong, very potent, very like soul snatching emotions happening there. And it's not inspired by money. It's not inspired by a pretty face. It's not inspired by height. All right. Oh boy, I can tell that, female game. I don't like, are you a guy? I think you're a dude. But yes, Prince Charming, tall, dark, and handsome. Sure. Yeah, these are the narratives that have been fed to us through, tons of stories throughout time, but I don't know. I think I'm like relatively handsome. I'm not like above the bar. I'm not over 6 feet tall. I'm not ripped. I don't have a shit ton of money, but I've experienced the utter devotion and surrender of certain girls that I know didn't have anything to do with any of that. Anything that I'm wearing. You know what I'm saying? And it's just about more so how they were made to feel, or how they were led to feel or able to feel in my presence, and because like I coach guys who are good looking. There was this guy, we'll call him G for short, and he lived out in California. And this guy was like, he basically looked like, what's his name? Chris Evans. He was basically like a Chris Evans lookalike, Captain America. Like he could have played Captain America. He had that like very American good boy, like a Boy Scouts look to him, and because he had internal fears, like of course women were attracted to him, right? And they were like, oh, like look at this guy, like he's tall, he's like muscular but not like grotesquely muscular. He has that face, that like classic American white guy face, dirty blonde hair, the whole thing, and of course, like he would get all kinds of attention for that on a surface level on dating apps. And the problem was that when he would start interacting with them, they would smell the insecurity on him. They would smell the fear on him. They would smell his subconscious desire to hide parts of himself. Right? He wasn't standing grounded, whole in front of a woman. They could just smell things were off with the dude. And so they would still come in, but they wouldn't stay in. They would find some reason to bounce, and a lot of it had to do with how he felt about himself, despite working in a decent job in the tech industry out in Silicon Valley, being fit, being taller than like most average men, and having like a good like Chris Evans type look to his face. And he had issue with that, but we worked on it and dug things up, and it turned out that he had a high level of self-rejection due to the influences of his mother. And he was never good enough for her, and she was constantly putting him down throughout his whole childhood, and it arrested his development in this thing. So he never felt good enough for girls despite having all this attention. He kind of his subconscious didn't believe it. And so he never allowed any of these things to happen because he was constantly rejecting himself. And so we took some time to kind of dismantle that, take those beliefs and hold them up to the light and show him that they were transparent. They didn't have any sort of real density to them. And it took some time to unwire that stuff and then rewire other things and rewrite neural pathways so that he had different beliefs about himself. And then, he's messaging me, calling me up, showing me screenshots and shit about his interactions afterwards. And it's like, because the girls felt so safe in his own conviction of himself and the comfort in himself, that once he started directing and commanding and opening them up and bringing out their vulnerability, because he was no longer in a vulnerable state in hiding and protecting, that everything, like the sky was the limit. And they started just really just dumping their hearts on the floor for him. And then I was like, look, this is what it's like, I don't know where he is now. I haven't spoken to him in a number of months, but Ludwig. Uncle Justin, you're absolutely right. It's plausible deniability. I felt negative about myself when it comes to women just because I'm a fat dude who's 5'7". Okay. But that, so what that is, what's happening there is basically saying women are the measuring stick for my self-worth. All right. When really, if you look at it, if you really start like peeling away the layers, you've already determined this about yourself. And it's using that for confirmation bias. It's using women's rejection as confirmation bias for something you already believe. So really the main issue isn't like whether they accept you or not. Like that's irrelevant. Like it's irrelevant what girls do, you know, with respect to like how you feel about yourself. And because really it's all about the communication with yourself, the relationship with yourself. And what you're describing here shows that you have a certain amount of self-rejection. You know, there's pathways out of it, but you know, it takes some work. It takes a little bit of time, patience, consistency, just like everything else that you want to improve, you know. Sunday at 9 p.m. Cool. You know, female game. I wish that you would change your name to like a man's name. I don't want to call you female. Sorry, but you know, why not man game? Like that sounds better. Anyways, drop me a line on Instagram. It's thedominance.academy. And drop me a line there. We can connect. I'd be happy to chat with you. Maybe stop through if you do like one of those open panels. Yeah. Women have been quoted saying it's only sexual harassment if he's ugly, right? I've seen videos like that, you know, like the old guy and he's like, nice dress. He's like sitting there like drunk on the corner, nice dress. And she's like, oh my God, you know? And then it's like a decent looking guy. She's like, oh, thank you. You know, they're the only ones who can determine a man's looks level, not a man. Yeah, but the problem is caring. You see, like this too, I was just talking to Ludwig about how there's a perspective that gets carved into your mind, into your self-perception, where you turn women into this authority, an authority over you of what's good enough, you know? And that is entirely crippling to everything that you are. Is to make someone, especially like a woman, to be your measuring stick for self-worth. That is a losing battle. That's a losing strategy, where you're always going to be in a position of submission. You will always be in a position of a submissive to someone who doesn't want to be the dominant, but you're placing them in the position of dominance by giving them the responsibility through the belief that they are the only ones who can determine a man's looks level. And a lot of times there will be a resistance to accepting what I'm saying. And they'll say, yeah, but look at this study. Okay. That study is coming from the same position of putting a woman as an authority. Okay. Like I said, I'm not like a strikingly handsome guy. Like I've never been approached and offered like a modeling gig, right? I used to be a trainer, like at, a big like gym chain in Manhattan many years ago. And like one of my clients, like he was like that, you know, like he got approached. He was just walking down the street in Manhattan and someone was like, holy shit, we need to get you on a magazine cover. Like that has never in my life happened to me. not once. Okay. I'm sure it's happened to him many times, you know? But I'm not striking, you know, in that way, but I understand what actually influences, you know, and I don't care if there's many women who find me handsome. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, who gives a fuck, you know? Like, what does that actually do for me? Nothing, because my cup is already full with myself. My cup is full of self-respect and self-love. I don't need it from anywhere else. Okay. And so I have my program, I have my way, I have my constitution, and this is what guides me through life, of me seeing what's good enough. It's based on my constitution, right? My principles, my codes, and my rules. This is what guides me as like my higher, framework, And some guys, they might use like, religious structures and things like that, but I'm not that way. So I made my own commandments, so to speak. And this is what I measure against. Is this good enough? Am I measuring up to what I expect of myself based on the plan that I created for myself? And by meeting those things, that's what helps create self-worth. Also dismantling false beliefs that you're not good enough, that you learned over here, that you picked up over there, that you were conditioned to believe over there. And, together it makes you more calm, less anxiety, and more settled, more grounded. You feel like you have both feet on the earth. And like women then at that point just become NPCs, like it doesn't matter what the perception is. What matters is my perception. And I can guarantee that with my girl, my perception of her is way stronger than her perception of me. Because she knows that I'm not using her perception as a means of keeping me attractive or keeping me on the straight and narrow or keeping me in a way that keeps her. My program does. My constitution keeps me on the right road, not what she thinks of me or how she perceives me. Right? She can take it or leave it. It doesn't matter. Like, what matters to me is, am I following what I'm supposed to be following based on what I expect of myself and a set of principles? And, and then she comes into this willingly. And now my judgment, my perception has much more weight. And I know this is like a callous way to say it, but it's like there's a greater concern of losing my favor than the other way around. And that's just what happens when you assume a position of authority, when you assume a position of leadership and influence. And that fear can remain like forever, okay, like just a little bit. But the difference is that it gets reinforced by way of like, operant conditioning, positive reinforcement, and other various things where, it's sort of like sweetened, where that fear, the edge is kind of taken off because it's not tyrannical, right? There is that edge of fear, but there's so much more of like the other things such as safety and willingness to create vulnerability. And then once that's open, it's like the doors just kind of blow off their hinges and they just kind of stay in this like vulnerable state. And provided you lead properly, that state can just remain indefinitely, where they're just open. Like they're, the girls in the images, like their soul is this way. Their consciousness is this way. Like around you, like all the time. And this is kind of, I know female game. I can't get past that name, bro. It's a new space for you, and I appreciate you coming through. But, we approach things very differently here. Very differently. It's not a common space. Oh, no. It's not about knowledge. This is not about knowledge. This is about how I feel about myself. That's the cup. It's the cup of self-respect and the cup of self-love. Yes, your mind, as Bruce Lee always says, you need to empty your cup. And this is done all the time. I learn from everybody. I learn from morons. I learn from geniuses. I learn from crazy homeless dudes on the street. And some of them say some really fucking wise shit if you pause to listen. Some of them, okay? I learn from so many people. But it's not about learning. It's about how you feel about yourself. And if your cup is full of self-respect that's based on what you give to yourself and not reliant on anyone else to do that, because then you are, reliant on them, right? It becomes a crutch. You become submissive to that. Then you, no doubt. Yeah, message me. Go to thedominance.academy on IG and we'll connect from there. I'd be happy to get with you. But yeah, just it all changes. Like, it all changes when you make yourself the measuring stick, like a higher, more refined version of yourself. And this is like the first step. It's like creating that thing. What happens as a natural reaction is that if you're not like meeting that, then the ego wants to step in and the ego wants to step in and feel bad for not doing the thing, right? Or meeting the standard that you set for yourself. And that is a step that the ego takes so that you don't have to do the thing necessary to do the right thing, right? You're kind of stuck in this sadness. You're like, oh, I can't do anything. I'm so sad. I'm so depressed that I'm not like doing the thing I should be doing, you know? And that's just a defense mechanism of your ego to keep you where you are. Right? So it's also a practice in kind of like pushing that aside and being like, okay, cool, like fine, I'm not pleased, but it ends there. What's the plan? What's the strategy? Okay? Not my intention. Oh, I intend to unfuck my own brain. I intend to respect myself more. I intend to love myself more. But I feel so bad when I don't do it, and I just want to sit and wallow. And then when I'm bored of that, I'm going to play video games. You know? It's like, all right, good plan, pal. Right? But that's just all ego, right? It's self-centeredness in like a very like backwards kind of way. So it's a habit in sort of it's a habit of bringing about an awareness to your emotional reactions, to you trying to rewire things, and then push that aside and be like, okay, I recognize that, right? Which is a tool you're going to use when dealing with girls or you're a woman or what have you. Is you acknowledge the state, but you don't get guided by the state. I mean, look, you push it, make some room, okay? Pushing out hands, you can't see my hands, but I'm pushing them out to the sides. and say, okay, cool, right? Acknowledge this is unpleasant. I don't like this. What am I going to do about it? What can I do about it? Do I know about, how to improve the thing that I want to prove on? Do I know anyone who does know? And I wouldn't go the way of books. Like, the self-help book industry is a huge fucking racket. It's a huge racket. Stop dumping your money on fucking self-help books. Like, some of it's like cool to read and like, oh yeah, that's like some cool fodder for the brain. But I don't know of anybody who's like read something and they're like, dude, bro, like that self-help book changed my life, It's like Wayne Dyer, he's a great writer. Like, he's got a lot of great books that kind of like get you thinking in different ways. And he makes a lot of great points. But I've never felt like transformed after reading one of his books. And that's the thing. You cannot transform from reading. There's no way that, because books have to reach a number of people, okay? I'm an individual. I've got my own things going on, right? That guy over there, he's got his own things that are very specific to his nervous system, his current psychology, how that psychology was formed, the influences on that, his beliefs, his perspectives, his feelings, all that shit. It's all very individual, okay? And like someone else might have very similar things, but the dials on all those different things are turned to different levels. And so, like someone might have had like a manipulative mother, but guy A, that was only like a level 3 manipulation, but the guy B, it was like level 9. They both had manipulative mothers. You know what I mean? So like Wayne's book isn't going to really hit both of them in the same way, nor can it address any of those things directly, which is what must happen. like pure, like fine-tooth comb investigation must happen in order to create understanding so that you can dismantle something. Okay? That's how you go about this. You have to understand first, then you can figure out what to do. You know? Like Picasso, and a lot of people don't know that Picasso was classically trained. Like, he can paint realism like a motherfucker. All right? But he said, you know, one of his famous quotes was, you have to learn the rules before you break them. And then that's when he became innovative. Like, after he learned the right way, then he would say, you know what? Fuck all that shit. I'm going to make my own thing, you know? And so in order to really reformulate things, you have to have an understanding of what is, what standard is, even if it's a terrible standard, right? Whether it's filled with self-hate or self-rejection or a lot of self-criticism or, you know, whatever. There's varying degrees of all that shit. You have to understand the current situation of where it rests now and try to get as clear as possible, you know? And like, no book is going to allow you to do that. Not one book. All right. So that's why I think it's a racket. You know, it's just kind of like filling your head with fluff. And I use books with my guys to kind of like introduce certain concepts, which will then become strengthened through the coaching. All right. So that's why I recommend certain reads. You know, if you guys are looking for like good ones, I already mentioned like Hagakure. That's a good one. You know, Iron John is a great book. No More Mr. Nice Guy. There's like a couple of good ones. I have to like pull up my list for my students, but it's, you know, it's good stuff. One. And now she's gleaming now after she's completed her punishment for being forgetful and annoying. Vivek the Homeless Prophet is a great video, still on YouTube and well worth it. Yeah, you know, it's funny. I used to, all right, so like I went to school in, college in Syracuse, went to Syracuse University, go Orange, okay? And I would skateboard a lot. And the downtown area, first of all, there wasn't like a lot of activity down there for some reason. Just, there wasn't a whole lot. Except on one street where there was like bars and restaurants. But beyond that, you know, which made it great for skateboarding. So like me and my guys, we would just skate around, you know, we'd hit various areas. And there was also a psych institution not far, like away from the downtown center. And because there was a lot of like borderline people, you know, they would just kind of like let them out. They're like not crazy enough to keep in, but they're certainly a little too weird to let out, but they do it anyways because they're not crazy enough to keep in. And so they'd just be like wandering around, you know, and skaters, if you know, like, you know, we'll skate for a while and then we'll kind of like sit and relax, you know, have some Gatorade or a beer, smoke a blunt, whatever. And like these guys eventually just kind of come over, you know, because they're fairly peaceful for the most part, and they just start talking, you know. And for some reason, they were always coming to me. These like crazy, oh, that's a cool book. Okay, check out this book called Crazy Wisdom. It's a really, actually, I want to get that again. I lost my copy of it. I'm gonna pull it up right now. Crazy Wisdom. I gotta find that again. But really cool book. Is it by Dharma Ocean? No, that's not it. Yeah, maybe that's not the name. It's something along those lines. I think it had like a green cover, but it wasn't related to Buddhism. So anything like Buddhism, that's not it. So I'm seeing there's a bunch of books around that. But so always there was like these just insane guys, like just kind of like drawn to me. I guess because I was like open to it and talking with them, and some of the most brilliant, like philosophical things would come out of their mouths that I've ever heard in my life. And I'm just like, holy shit, like I'm high. Like, how high are you? You know, I feel like I'm just crazy. I'm not high at all, you know. But and that's, you know, that's kind of the openness that I had when it came to learning and developing myself. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, they can help bring new ideas. Like, I think like understanding comes through experiencing as well. That's why I don't like all this theory shit. You know what I mean? Like, so many guys are lost in theory. Like the stuff, like female game. God, I wish it would fucking change that name. It's just, you look at the like things that he said, and guys who say similar things, it's largely based in theories. It's largely based in these conceptual models that, when you speak them, they're logically consistent, so they're quite believable. But if you see, like, well, how many times have you experienced this? How many women have you been with in like deep, like really like intertwined, intimate interactions? All right. How many? For how long? To then make your claims really hold water. Okay, almost to the point where it's like airtight. All right, to have an airtight claim, that's super. But like, say just watertight, a watertight claim. Or are these just things that you're picking up from this source, picking up from that source, this study, that study, this, YouTube channel, this TikTok little blurb? That's how I think most guys are just kind of collecting this information. They're collecting from other guys, and there's no telling, like, none of it sounds original. Like, I called out a guy, on Instagram, and like, they were talking about Breifolt's law. Okay. And Breifolt's law, was about like mating, like between like female and male species. Okay, so the Breifolt's law is a theory that states the female of a species determines the conditions of the animal family, and that any association will occur if the female benefits from it. And this is, and I, argued with the guy who posted it. I said, this is a very like blue pill thing to say, right? That's a very blue pilled way of living. That's how most guys live, right? They live with the idea that the female determines the conditions of the animal family, and that any association will only occur if the female benefits from it, right? That's why the guy's like, oh, I have to be tall, I have to be rich, I have to be good looking, I have to be popular, right? Looks, money, status. I have to, have some sort of manipulative game. I have to do this, I have to do that. Okay. All in this attempt to win female favor, which then by default puts her in a position of authority. Now, let's say that's true to some degree. Okay. Let's say that's true to some degree. Okay. Women, and you can ask as many women as you like, all right, say, when it comes to relationship, now this probably never happened because guys are just afraid to talk to girls, but let's say like messaging, I don't know, whatever. Ask them, when it comes to your relationships with men, would you prefer to be in a position of authority in that relationship? And I would say that like 9.8% or 9.9 out of 10 will say no. So then for me, that begs the question, then why are guys like insistent on putting women in a position of authority over them? It doesn't make any sense to me. If women don't want to be in a position of authority, why are you putting them in a position of authority? They don't want to do that. They want to be chosen. They don't want to be the chooser. They want to be directed. They don't want to be the director. You see? Women, they are receivers. And you can even like look at the shape of like their bodies. Okay? Like there's like a vessel inside them designed for receiving. Okay? Men are form, women are void. If you want to bring this into like metaphysical symbolism. They represent the void. You look at the symbols, those, I don't even know where those originated, but like the male symbol is the arrow, right? It penetrates. It's solid object, okay? The other one is either a hole on a stick or a mirror. You know, I've heard people describe it as a mirror, a hole, whatever. But either way, both of those symbols are receivers. They receive and reflect if it's a mirror. If it's a hole, it just receives. So it's like, that's not a position to be in authority, okay? It's to be receiving form, to be receiving structure, to be receiving direction, to be receiving influence and guidance, right? Women are the liquid that goes into your crucible, into your vessel. But guys are engaging them on the level where women are in their protective modes, right? They're engaging with just the woman's armor. And they think that's all she is. They don't even realize that there's a core, this soft, squishy core that can be liquefied just underneath that armor. But that's all they engage with. They just engage with the armor and thinking, oh, this is who she is. No, that's who she's had to be. That's who she's had to become. That's not what she is. What she is far less defined and far more vast than what you are seeing. The core is quite a bit closer to being nameless and faceless, that takes the shape of whatever vessel it's being poured into. When there's less and less opportunities or need to wear armor, she becomes less and less defined by choice, by the world, by this or that influence, and more defined by you. But you yourself have to have definition, right? And the definition comes about through understanding what your codes are. What do you stand for? What is you beyond your name, your background, your upbringing, where you went to school, like all that stuff? That's all like superficial things, right? But what is like your personal family crest? What principles keep your behavior on the straight and narrow? What codes do you aspire towards that you hold to your heart? What rules do you keep for yourself that keep you in line? You know, like that's much more important and definitive than what you studied in college or what your current job is. Okay. Those things, you know, I call them CPRs, codes, principles, and rules. The CPRs is what defines more of you than anything else that you could possibly like put in your bio on a dating app. Okay. Like that's the conditioned you. That's the assumed you. That's the, the thing that you've had to construct so that you can interact with the world on like a regular basis. Okay. But that's not really what you're about. It's not what's operating at your core. And so, but when that's established and there is something known, okay, then from there, from your constitution, the CPRs, it creates the constitution by including your values. Then you bring about your program. And the program is the architecture by which you operate a relationship. Okay. And that has a lot of details into it. You know, it includes like your needs, your desires, your kinks, your preferences. There's a whole list of them. Okay. If I remember correctly, at least in my design of these things, a program is set by 7 different characteristics. And then those get fleshed out into detail. Okay. And then once you have an understanding of this, then it's much easier to convey. It's much easier for someone to follow, right? And it keeps everything orderly, right? And through structure, right, from what I read earlier, it's actually through that structure, she's able to find freedom. She finds liberation through that structure. And I know for guys who, the uninitiated, they don't understand. They think, like, how would giving her more control, or not giving her more control, but bringing her into more control, produce freedom within her. And it's just know that the freedom is an emotional thing. It's an emotional state. And if you guys know anything about girls, that emotions are a major part of their psychology. It really forms the lenses by which they look at the world. You can tell just by how they watch movies, and why literature is so powerful with them. Because when they're watching a movie, they're actually not just like watching it from a distance. Part of their psychology puts them into the role of whatever woman is in that movie. Let's say it's like there's a female character, or one of the main characters is a woman. She will like identify or like partially place herself into that character. And the same thing happens, but I think in a more intense level is like through literature and reading. And this is why, I read that by like 2027, the erotic literature genre is going to be a multi-billion-dollar, a trillion-dollar industry. Right now, it's $1 billion industry, and because women, they love that shit. And what happens is they get transported. Like part of their consciousness gets completely transported into the story. That's why you should always like get yourself a girl who likes to read. Yep. Especially fiction. Yep. Get yourself a girl who likes to read fiction and enjoys reading, okay? Because that means that she has a connection with her mind in a certain way that kind of parallels how you will influence her, because it taps into some of the same material, the same materials as the way a piece of literature taps into her mind. It's a parallel line. So if the mind is already primed, or she just has that kind of mind, where by reading, then it's just going to make your efforts just a lot easier. It's going to be a lot easier, if you're skilled, if you know what you're doing. It just makes things so much easier. Because a lot of your leadership, a lot of your commands will come in the form of pictures, but pictures through words. And, if you can combine pictures with words and emotions, and we're talking all of the emotions, from like happiness, sadness, fear, anger, joy, despair, like all of them, they're all valuable, and they can all be channeled. They can all be utilized, with your word to produce tremendous effects, and I don't say this from like a manipulative position. I say this from the position of guidance, because again, you need to understand something in order to direct it, whether it's your own mind or someone else's mind. So you can't sit here and judge a woman for being a woman. You can't judge their psychology for being what it is. Just accept it. Accept that it's not like yours, and revel in the fact that it's not like yours. Like, I can't stand it when I hear guys talk about their annoyance with how girls think sometimes, and then they're like, oh, well, why can't they just be like this? And then they go on to describe those things, and I'm like, don't you realize that you're describing a man? Like, the thought patterns and the structure. So you're basically asking a woman to think like a man. And then and then the girls are like, well, okay. And then those same guys will complain them for being masculine. Go figure. Like, pick your battle, Pick your battle. Don't tell women to be a certain way and then complain at the result. It's like, well, all she's doing is listening to you. You want to be more responsible, more like, clear headed, more assertive. You wanted them to talk to you. You wanted to be the cute one sitting at the bar and have her approach you, right? And then, and then you get turned off by the fact that she's behaving too masculine for you. Right? Well, it's like, well, be careful what you wish for, But also be careful what you wish for when it comes to leadership and influence, because again, like I hear guys say it all the time, men are the leaders, we should be able to lead, we should be the one in charge or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Well, I think that a lot of those guys who are, kind of like dragging their scrotums on the ground like that, they've not really understood or felt the responsibility of that and what that feels like. And it's not like I guess like once you get used to it, you're just like, whatever, but it's not like this pleasant thing, like being in charge is not about how it makes you feel. And again, like that's been like the pussification of guys. Like they're guided by their feelings. That's no shade being thrown on pussies. I love pussies, but yeah, it's the pussification of guys. That they're guided by how they're feeling, and it's like, listen, being in charge has nothing to do with how you feel or fulfilling your feelings. If you're going to assume a position of leadership, your feelings should already be fulfilled by yourself. Having her around is not supposed to be that thing. She's not supposed to be your garden hose that you can use when you're feeling low. That's not what she's there for. And then you might be like, well, if not that, then for what? Good question. Really good question. Because if, like, let's say like you don't want kids or you can't have kids or whatever, okay? But you'd still like a woman in your life. What for? Well, I want sex. Okay, she gives you all the sex you want. Great. You get whatever you want to do all the time. Or never. Like whatever your preference is, okay? You have that. Now what? Why is she there? Like, is that it? Just to get you off physically? Well, eventually your body's going to betray you. So now why is she there? See, I know why. I know why my woman is in my life, right? It's not for progeny, right? I already have that. So what is it? And I realized that there's an aspect of me that's charged, that it's not charged by, but it's just a part of me, which is this whole power dynamic thing. And so in order for me to fully express, in the creative ways of dominance, I need something there to receive it, right? To shape and change things around, guide things. And this is, their presence is required in order to fully express it, okay? It's not required to embody it, okay? To be in that state, or just to, it's not something I turn on and off, right? So it's just here all the time. So it's nothing required enough for me to possess myself of dominance, okay? But in order to express it, there needs to be the receiver. So I often refer to my sub as like a canvas, and I can wipe it clean and or gesso it all white again, and now I'm going to do a new sketch and work that into a painting. Or I can just throw like splatter paint on it, whatever I want to do, whatever I'm feeling, or if I want to do like a still life or whatever. And so this gives me the opportunity to express myself more completely, So that's my knowledge. Like, I know myself enough to say that's why a woman needs to be there in the way that she needs to be, which kind of like completes the expression circle, if that makes sense. Because I've got all these ideas, I've got all these things that I want to like implement, and some are like on a psychological development angle. Some of them are just pure play. Sometimes it's like role play stuff. Sometimes it's just creating more sadistic sort of scenarios where there's catch-22 type things. But I can't really put them into action until there's that canvas there. So I know. So if you have a desire for a woman to be in your life, understand what it is. And likely, there's, unless you've done like a lot of extensive work on yourself, there's likely going to be some influence there about whatever sort of pain you're holding on to, whatever sort of fears you're holding on to, whatever sort of beliefs that you've come to be conditioned with. And that's going to most definitely change, alter, and mutate how you interact with a woman and why she's there even in the first place. And a lot of it is like what I said, is to like utilize her as like a garden hose. And I'm not saying like just as like to satisfy sexual thirst or visual thirst, but emotional thirst. And the guys will just want to get that hose like whatever way they can and not even realize that they're doing that. That's the most detrimental thing. They don't realize that they're guzzling off of a garden hose and using her, like basically just kind of like siphoning energy off of her so that he can feel more emotionally safe. And he calls it having sex. He calls it dating. And this translates into all kinds of weird behaviors, like nice guy syndrome, for example. Well, there's others. So really, you can't cleanly have a woman in your life until you've sorted out your shit. That's how it works. Because if you don't, then everything you think, say, and do with respect to a woman, whether you're just talking, you're dating, you're in a relationship, you're married, what have you, okay? Or you're in a dynamic, like a power exchange dynamic, it's all going to be altered by that stuff. It's going to be altered by your shit. And it's really dangerous if you're not even aware. If you're not even aware of the shit that you possess. Or maybe you are and you don't want to face it. You kind of like sweep it under the rug. You're like, yeah, that's not affecting anything. Whatever. So my dad used to, stab my arm with a fork, every weekend when he got drunk. I know a guy. So it's had something similar. But I was like, no, that couldn't possibly affect how I interact with women or other humans, period. No, everything's fine. I just freak out a little bit when I don't hear from her. I get into like just this anxiety shock and just start drinking. It's like, well, I think maybe like you got some shit to unravel, bro. This is, yeah, you gotta take yourself seriously. Like if you want to be taken seriously, start with taking yourself seriously. If you treat yourself like a joke, don't expect other people to do otherwise. Right? And that means like handling your shit. That sounds kind of gross, but handling your problems. Discovering them so that they can be handled. All right. Okay, it's 1:30. I'm going to let you guys go. I've rambled on quite enough. Yeah, it's been 2 hours and 4 minutes. So I was thinking about rereading that piece that I have here about intention versus strategy. But instead of doing that, I'm just going to suggest that you rewind and listen again. Please go to thedominance.academy.com and check out what I got going on there. There's a section. I'm going to put the link again in here. Okay. There's a section in the called tutorials. I put new stuff in there every week. There's some more beginner things in there right now about boundaries, communication, and commanding. And there's another one in there about killing the nice guy. So if you into that level of stuff, that's great. The other stuff that's in there right now is a bit more advanced. And that's about really using your will to influence and reshape the woman's mind to not just to your benefit, but to her benefit as well. To help produce, greater arousal, greater freedom, less anxiety, less fear, that sort of stuff. Trust building stuff, but also like just a lot of arousal stuff, and understanding how visual communication works, like using your words to produce visuals through communication. The power of influence, the power of operant conditioning, all that good stuff. And you think that you don't need to like train people to behave a certain way, but you absolutely do. I mean, we've all been trained to behave a certain way, right? I mean, we're no longer like walking around like shitting our pants, yeah? But at one time you were. you became potty trained, right? And you no longer had to wear a diaper. You were trained to say thank you when somebody gave you something. I'm training my sub to say thank you after she's been punished. But not because for some sick, twisted thing, right? But to understand that I took the time to focus on her so much that it was to correct certain behaviors. That I'm giving her more attention, right? And it's not with anger or anything like that. It's with a big heart, of guidance. So yeah, she thanks me when I correct her. She thanks me when I punish her, which is not very often. But we've all been trained to do certain things, to think a certain way. So there's a good deal of that stuff in there, but all sorts of stuff are coming through in the tutorials. And there's very low level barrier of entry, because I wanted just to be able to share this stuff with as many men as possible, and not put some like huge price point on a bunch of lessons. And people can just kind of come in, they take a bite, and and they can leave. So all right, so we're calling it quits. Thank you for coming through on this live. And for those of you catching on the replay, I appreciate you as well. Support is always appreciated. Let's see. Tomorrow, I don't know if we're recording or we're going live. I'm not sure. But I'm going to be doing some stuff with Mr. Lucario from the Bad Boy membership, Bad Boy of the Dating Game. He's actually local to me, so I'm going to go to his studio and either do some recording or live stuff. I'm not sure what he has planned. So that's going to be happening around 4 o'clock. So just be on the lookout on his channel if you're familiar with him, and see what's up around 4 p.m. Eastern time. And that's what's up. Okay, guys. Until next time, take it easy.